meeting via Zoom. So my apologies to everyone on that. I also have a minor emergency happening at the house, which may require me to suddenly go off camera. So I'm trying to get through the procedural items as quickly as possible here, so that if that does happen, I have the ability to hop off. So if I believe that we have quorum, so therefore I'm going to call this meeting to order and ask the secretary to call roll.
All right, we are recording. Welcome to the University Hill Commercial Area Management Commission meeting. It is May 6, 2025, and I will call roll. Trent Bush,
Present.
Cal Jones,
Here.
Danica Powell is not here yet. Ted Rockwell,
Here.
Dana Anderson,
Here.
Andrew Shoemaker.
Here.
I will turn the meeting over to Chair Rockwell for procedural items.
Thank you, Ellie. So our first procedural is a farewell to Andrew Shoemaker. Andrew has served this commission for oh so many years. I really appreciate everything that you've brought to this commission and the energy that you've brought to the Hill. Thank you so much for your service. You oversaw a lot of big change that is now in action on the Hill. So thank you very much, Andrew. Do any other commissioners or staff have anything they would like to say towards Andrew at this time?
Thank you. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you very much. I'll say it.
Go ahead.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a great board. We have seen a lot of change in the past 4 or 5 years, however long it's been, and I've never been more optimistic about the Hill than now. And I think one of the things that, we always thought would happen if we could get it done with that hotel was that we would create the market demand that would change the Hill. But I don't think no one foresaw was the fact that we would cause the rest of the city to focus on University Hill, which has been sorely lacking, and it's caused, it's made a world of difference before the real market impact. So it's so exciting, and I want to thank all members of staff who've just been great to work with, and thanks for all your hard work on the Hill and all my fellow commissioners, and welcome.
Thank you. Well, we really appreciate you, not just for your service on this commission. You've been serving this community in a variety of ways for a really long time, and so it's really hard to see you leave us, but I think we're a bit over the end of your term, I think, or is it supposed to end this year?
I think it's supposed to.
Okay. All right, well, big shoes to fill, Dane. But as a token, a not so small token of our appreciation, we would like to present to you a piece of art that you will hopefully be able to display in a very appropriate place in your home or office, wherever you would like. With some notes of gratitude on the back. You can hang it whichever way you'd like.
It's great. It means a lot to me. Hill's got a special place in my heart, so thank you all so much.
Absolutely. There are cookies if you haven't already. You can grab a cookie to celebrate Andrew's departure, and you do not have to stay with us for the entire meeting. You're welcome to as a member of the community. But we really appreciate you.
Okay, good. I'll stay for a few minutes and then may bug out of these.
Well, thank you all. Thank you to staff for that gift for Andrew. And thank you, Andrew, for your service to the Hill Commission and to the city. That brings us to the next order of business, which is welcoming a new member of the commission, Dane Anderson. Chris, I believe that you have some documentation there to give him the oath of office.
I do, Dane. We have an oath of office statement that I can recite and have you repeat, or if you would like to read it yourself. That is totally acceptable as well. We just want to make sure you're on camera.
Okay.
And are heard, and then, yeah, we proceed.
I, Dane Anderson, do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America, and the state of Colorado, and the charter and ordinances of the city of Boulder, and faithfully perform the duties of the office of a member of the University Hill Commercial Area Management Commission, which I'm about to enter.
All right, congratulations. You are sworn in. We do need you to sign this. and then that will be in our records. You do have a certificate here. It's very official from the city clerk's office stating your appointment by city council. With that, and if the chair would like to maybe provide a moment for folks to more formally introduce themselves to Dane and share a little bit about themselves and vice versa. Now might be a good time for that.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Ted Rockwell. I happen to be the chair of the University Hill Commercial Area District Commission. I work at CU. I'm an assistant dean for marketing and communications there, and really have an affinity for supporting the city, but also in particular the Hill. I've worked on the Hill for the better part of 20 years, and really want to see it be successful. So I will hand off to, hey, Trent, I see you. How about you?
Cool. Trent Bush, Boulder resident, spent a lot of years on the Hill, started businesses up there over the years, have generations of family who have worked up there as well. So it's still, you know, it's really in my heart as well to see the Hill turn from sort of the harder years it's had to something new and exciting and different. I also, I guess I'm on the board of directors of the Boulder Chamber. And yeah, so that's kind of something, yeah.
Danica, why don't you go next? Danica's on Zoom as well as I am. So Danica.
Hi there, I'm Danica Powell. I am a newer member of UCAMC. I also serve on the Boulder Chamber Board of Directors with Ted. I've served on many other boards with other people in the room. I was, I think, back on planning board with Andrew Shoemaker a long time ago. And so tend to be kind of like to be on boards and help shape policy and work in the community. And I own a consulting firm. I also worked on the Moxie Hotel on the entitlements. So kind of helping bring that project to fruition in Boulder, up on the Hill.
Thank you, Danica. And then next, Tell, if you could do an introduction.
Paul Jones. I've been on this board for almost 2 years now. It's my first board ever serving. I'm a business partner at the Seat on the Hill.
Awesome.
All right. So Dane, that gives you an opportunity to introduce yourself to the commission.
I'm Dane Anderson. I lived here 25 years ago. I moved back 2.5 years ago. I love Boulder, love the mountains, and I love the Hill, and there quite frequently. But no, my first mission to be on, and I'm excited to work with everybody.
Excellent. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there today in person, but I look forward to our next meeting. I'm going to move on then to item C of the procedural items, the approval of the March 25 meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the meeting minutes as submitted?
Thank you.
I see that. And do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? Great. I'm calling for a vote. All those in favor of approving the March 25 meeting minutes? All right. That's a unanimous, I believe. I'm going to move on to item D, approval of the April 25 special meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the special meeting minutes as submitted? All right, I saw that Tell just made a motion. Yep. Who's going to second that?
Seconded.
All right, there we go. Trent seconds it. Any discussion? All right, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of approving the April 25 special meeting minutes? That's a unanimous vote as well. That is passed. All right, now to the real meat of the matter. We need to elect a chair and vice chair for this commission going forward. So I'm going to just kind of say to everyone on this group, it has been a pleasure to be your chair the last 2 years. I would be happy to continue to do that. But I'm also going to say that if anyone is willing to take on the chairmanship or chairpersonship, please make sure that we know that. Otherwise, I'm happy to accept a nomination to continue as chair. We also need to have a nomination for a vice chair to help back me up or take my place in those kinds of situations. So, do I hear any nominations for chair or vice chair at this time?
I would need to nominate Ted Rockwell as chair. of this commission.
Excellent. Any other nominations for chair?
I'll do the same. for
Okay.
Ted Rockwell.
All right. Excellent. We've established that, I think, if there's no forward, that's cool. We'll vote on that in a minute. I'm going to pair these two together, hopefully. We'll see how this goes. Any nominations for vice chair? All right.
I'll do it if you need me to.
I'm going to nominate Danica Powell for vice chair.
I shared with Ted, I'm the vice chair of the chamber, which means I'm going to be chair
That's funny.
next year. And so I'm a little overwhelmed by that, but I know we need some, what is it word? Progression. I don't know. We need, what's the word, Ted?
Continuity. Yeah.
Continuity.
Yeah.
So I will do that, but I don't know. Well, hopefully I can make it work.
Tell or Trent, I look to you just for a minute to do a little self-reflection and just see whether or not this is something that you might want to be nominated for.
Should we vocalize this or should we just reflect in silence?
You can reply with something.
In my case, with what's going on right now, in my business and all kinds of things, it's kind of the same as when we had the discussion last year. I'm most likely going to be on the road a lot and most likely going to be out of the country a lot. And it's not something I feel like I could, with good faith, execute if I were so called upon.
Want me to go? I feel like I'm too new to this, to be in that position. And I am pretty busy as of the moment.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I will continue nominating Danica for vice chair. The thing I will say for the good of the order is that I do cycle off in 26. So we are going to need to really think seriously about what our succession planning is going to be in terms of having a chair. So later on this year, we may want to kick that forward and have a real discussion about that. At the moment, I'm going to move forward in the interest of having two viable candidates, and I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the nominations of Ted Rockwell for chair and Danica Powell as vice chair. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I see you, Trent. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
And Tell seconds. Excellent. Any discussion on these nominations before we move on to a vote? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call for a vote for the slate of Ted Rockwell as chair, Danica Powell as vice chair. All those in favor? All right, I believe I see a unanimous vote there to elect those individuals. Congratulations, Danica.
Congratulations, Ted. Thank you for being our fearless leader another year. I will hopefully pay close attention and learn from you.
Oh, it's great. You'll do great. You'll do better than I did in that role because I barely was in it myself. Well, thank you all for that. And then an update on the bi-monthly check-in assignments. Wait, assignments. What does this mean? Just
So
who's doing what and
Ellie,
when? Right?
Exactly. So now that we have a new person on the commission and we go in alphabetical order, we just want to check in on, the who and when.
Okay.
And Ellie is leading that. Ellie, do you want to speak to what your recommendation is?
Yeah, so we have Trent on here twice and we had Tell already attended and he's on here again in October. I didn't know, Dane, if you had a chance to look at that, like consent agenda and see if any of those dates work for you. It's a bi-monthly meeting that happens in between the commission meetings. Okay. So we could do June 10th or October 14th or December 9th.
Oh, for me.
August
20th,
August 12th.
August 12th, that's me. I'll take it.
Or,
So
Ellie, but for the record, because that was really quiet, so it sounds like you're adding Dane to the June.
I'm not, sorry, I'm not sure. I think I said the wrong thing and now I feel like I'm taking up too much of the commission's time.
All right, so, we'll do some homework then on rotating Dane in according to alphabetical order. Based on where we're at in the rotation.
That sounds great. And so,
So saying that, so that's the thing is looking at the. What I'm showing for June 10th was Trent Bush. Now that we have an Anderson. In the rotation, I was presuming that that meant that we would switch the June 10th to Dane Anderson.
Does that work for you? You done?
June. Yeah. That's fine.
Thank you.
That's a 1 PM meeting.
So did you want-
Only for half an hour and it can be virtual.
That's fine.
All right, thank you.
thank you for that, Ellie. Thank you, Dane, for being flexible there. And, the purpose of those meetings is really just to touch in with city staff and with one another on off-cycle months and just have a bit of, let's make sure everyone knows what's going on. It's pretty low stakes. We're just trying to make sure there's a lot happening on the Hill and we want to make sure that everyone's on the same page about stuff. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ellie. Moving on, we're moving to item 3, public participation. Are there any members of the public here today who would like to address the commission?
There's no one online.
There is no one there. Okay, so seeing none, we're going to move on to the consent agenda section of our agenda. I'm going to take each one of these individually. Consent agenda. So these topics will not be discussed unless there are questions posed by the commission. Does anyone have any questions about the consent agenda for staff that they would like to bring up at this time? Okay. Fund financials. Are there anything on the fund financials that the commission would like to bring up with staff at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'm moving on then to the UGID visitation report. Are there any questions for staff around the Placer data at this time? All right, seeing none, I am going to ask for a motion to approve items 4, 5, and 6 of our agenda today for approval as submitted.
So moved.
All right, do I have a second? It's the same two, Trent and Tell, 1 and 2. All right, here we go. Any discussion about those? Seeing none, calling for a vote. All those in favor? Excellent. Thank you very much. All right, we're moving on then. We have a distinguished visitor today here for the commission, Chief Redfern. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Where should I stand?
I can see you there. That's fine.
The camera should be able to pick you up wherever you.
All right.
wherever you go.
Okay. Thanks for having me here today. It's been a little while. Always good to come in and have a conversation. I don't have a ton in the way of a formal agenda. Just a few things I'll hit on real quick. Department wise, just because it has a direct effect on what goes on the street. We are as fully staffed as we've been since 2016. We are in fact likely to overhire by 2 because of some impending retirements, so we can make sure we're getting enough officers through training to cover the street. So that's a really good thing. It's going to allow us to, once they're all trained up, reevaluate our deployments to see if there's areas like the Hill, like downtown, our traffic section, other places that we might need to supplement or add people back that we had to remove when staffing was really bad. So that's really exciting. We're fully staffed in our dispatch section and our record section as well. So really, really good. When I was at a conference last week with a bunch of other chiefs, and most departments are nowhere close to fully staffed. So I'm excited about that. So that's really a big internal update there. Obviously, we're excited as everyone else is for Sundance, and we're looking towards 27 to see what we need to do to make sure that we have the right infrastructure and technology and all those things to make sure it's a safe event. So you're going to, in the next year or 2, see some changes from the way we operate a little bit too, and probably push some people out of their comfort zones a little bit with some technology and cameras and things that. We've historically not been fans of here in Boulder, but we got to do it to keep things safe. So really, really
Hill wise, well, just say citywide, crime wise, we did not end the year on a high note in some categories. We were down in all property crimes in 24, but we were up significantly in things like aggravated assault and simple assault. The majority of those being in our in-house community. We are so far in, let's see, it's May, we're down in every crime category except simple assault, which means there's no weapon, there's no serious injury. Well, most of those categories were down double digits, burglary, robbery. Sex assault is trending up, but no patterns or anything of concern. So I'm happy with what we've been accomplishing when it comes to crime. The direction's been very clear to our officers: get out of your car, get on foot. We've just ordered 3 more e-bikes that you'll see on the hill and downtown. And we've taken a new stance along the creek path and other public spaces when it comes to camping. I hope you've seen the difference in the last couple months down, especially on the creek path here. We are not, we're being very clear about the rules and the laws, which we have not necessarily been in the past, or kind of just said, hey, we're gonna clean up this area, but if you kind of go down there, nobody's gonna mess with you. And I think that led to a culture where people felt that it was permissible to violate the law. As long as we have camping ordinances and tent ordinance and all those things on the books, we are our direction to our officers, and it's not just our homeless outreach team, it's the officers at 2 a.m. working patrol on a night that's quiet, they're getting out of their car at 2 a.m. and making contact with people camping and reminding them they can't be there. And so it seems to work. It seems to be working. It's not going to solve the long-term bigger issues that we all know about, which is a lack of mental health and drug treatment in the state. Continuously, even in this legislative session, really bad legislation was being pushed out of Denver that was contrary to public safety. And I'm not getting into it partisan, I'm getting into it as the chief of police that's responsible for public safety. So we're still struggling to have some support to be able to do our jobs. Just another example of where we're struggling, we had a woman yesterday pull a knife on a group of second graders that were on a field trip to the tea house. She pulled out a large knife and said she was gonna kill them and their teacher. Our officers got there, arrested her. She received a PR bond this afternoon, is already bonded out of jail, despite the DA's objections. So those are things we still struggle with, no matter how hard and how well-trained our cops are. Not that we get it right all the time, but we are struggling still with other parts of the system right now. That it's a work in progress moving forward. So that's, despite those things and some of those speed bumps, I think I'm really happy that we are where we are with crime. The Hill, we're fully staffed on our Hill team as well. I saw the flurry of emails that a lot of, I think some of you were in some of the emails maybe recently with the fireworks and other things, or at least copied on them. I have a meeting, we have a meeting Thursday with myself, the sheriff, the head of Open Space Mountain Parks, to figure out what we can do differently when it comes to Flagstaff, when it comes to some of the areas up and above town that aren't technically our jurisdiction, but they're in the city. And so we're figuring out ways to get a game plan where, because I don't like the response of like, well, I have a cop that's right here and seeing it going on, but it's not our jurisdiction, so we're not gonna go up there and address it. We're trying to figure out ways we can work with the sheriff. We're gonna have our lawyers in there to tell us what we can and cannot do, or yeah, you actually can go up there and enforce this, or you can't do that. So that's something we're very, we've heard the public's feedback, especially on the fireworks and street racing, and quite frankly, we do have violent crime up there from time to time. So I know that's been a frustration with some of the other Hill groups as well. So that's all good stuff that we're hopefully gonna make some progress on. And then yeah, we're looking forward to summer. There's still obviously the fish weekend. We've canceled all days off. We're gonna upstaff that heavily. We're not 100% sure what the impact that's gonna have on me, other than we know it will have an impact. And so CU's got a couple other concerts up their sleeves. They're not telling us what and when, but something in August, something in September. So we're waiting to see on that. We asked them to tell us as early as possible so we can make sure we have proper staffing. It's a challenge. So that's really all I have update wise. Happy to answer any questions or shut up, whatever you guys tell me. But as always, I will just encourage you all to let us know what you're seeing, what you're needing. If we're doing things that are not working, if we're falling short on things, I want to hear about it. Our commitment is to work with you all to ensure that Boulder is safer and that we're providing proper policing services. So that's my quick elevator speech. questions, concerns, feedback?
The only piece I have is something we discussed in the last meeting or so. A few of the things have been resolved. You know, we're charged with kind of the commercial district, of course, and we speak to the business owners. And those. One of whom was very vocal that they were being treated unfairly. We attended the hearing and realized that they were not being
I
treated
know what you're
unfairly.
talking about,
Well,
yes.
yeah, exactly. So, great. The other one though is we've heard that there is some ID checks and those kinds of things in front of certain businesses. Pizza 314 was those are the guys, the pizza pie guys came to us at the Hill mixer, and they have concern that they don't even serve alcohol because the ID checks were going on in front of their business. It kept kids from, when I say kids, I'm talking, it kept students
Right,
and people that are up
Okay.
there from going into their business because they didn't want anything to do with the, you know, even the thought of
Right.
the police.
that makes
presence.
sense.
So, yeah, and so it was just
That's probably something we can easily.
something I wanted to bring up because
Especially
it
if they don't
has been,
serve themselves.
they don't serve
Okay,
themselves. And
no,
so
that's good feedback.
if you put that check in front of a place that does serve, then that seems like an easier, better place to do
That's
it.
absolutely feedback, I sure,
So,
yeah.
cool. That's-
And just so everybody knows, we'll continue to do, we are going to continue to do underage stings. We are going
Yeah.
to continue to ensure that our liquor laws are being followed, and it's done on the Hill, it's done down here, it's done at the mom and pop gas stations. There's certain things that for me are non-starters, and serving underage especially, and I'm not as worried, never mind, this is recorded. Serving underage is problematic. There's a difference between high school kids going in to buy alcohol in a gas station versus a 20-year-old that's a little bit, hopefully more mature, drinking up on the Hill. They're still both illegal technically. But we've had some pretty significant high profile crashes and other things fueled by alcohol, and we're all for people having fun, and we're all for businesses being able to operate, but there's obligations, and we're going to continue to do that. I do want to hear if people feel like it's not being done equally and fairly across the board, and most of the time when I've heard that, we look into it and it absolutely is. So it's no surprise that those things are going to continue, and if people feel like they need help ensuring they're in compliance, we absolutely will do that. Our new liquor enforcement officer is great, and she is fully plugged in there.
Point of privilege, just want to check in. There was some question on occupancy. I know that there was maybe some work going on with the fire chief, fire marshal.
Yep, yeah, we are actively talking to fire, and actually, I think the fire chief is, I don't want to speak for him, but in our conversations, he believes that occupancy should be a fire thing. And not a PD thing, even though, I mean, most of us, anybody can walk into a place where this looks overcrowded. In most cities, that's in my prior city, if we were at a bar, it was problematic, especially ones where we'd have fights and all that. We'd go in and be like, this looks way overcrowded, and we would call somebody in the moment from the fire department to come out and do that occupancy check, and that's something that I think hopefully we can get to here. And with Sundance coming, we will likely be redoing a lot of the occupancy limits. In Park City, when we were there, they bring in engineers and actually do the occupancy limits, and they have a much different enforcement. I think we'll probably redo that because a lot of venues that aren't typically potentially right now serving alcohol, maybe serving alcohol, and we've got to look at that. So there'll be a ton more conversation on occupancy, but I don't feel like that's our expertise, so we're working on that. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
very
guys.
much.
Congratulations. And I'm sure we'll see you around somewhere else.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stick around.
I would love to, but I got another meeting to, despite the cookies. Thank you.
Okay, I'm back just for a second here. I'm sorry I had to hop off there. I'm gonna have to hop off again after I hand off to staff here for the next couple of agenda items. But thank you, Chief Redfern. Now we're gonna head off to staff Jake Hudson Humphrey for a Hill Boulder update. Is he here?
Jake could not attend this evening, but he sent me a note that I'm happy to share out. He says, the Hill Boulder is continuing to support the business district, maintain our directories, promote new businesses, and oversee district marketing, especially of the summer events on the Hill, including Roots Music Project and Fish. And that was it. And just to add on to that, the First Roots Music Project event is on June 19th. So coming up in a couple weeks on the event street.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Next item on the agenda is the flexible loading zone update from the esteemed Chris Hagelin. Hello, Chris.
Hello, thank you, Ted. Yes, Chris Hagelin here, Principal Project Manager for Transportation and Mobility, here to talk about the exciting field of curbside management and flexible loading zones. So I do know we have some new commission members, so I'll give a little background on this before I kind of get into my update of our plan for the third quarter. So way back in 2021, the city of Boulder received a grant to look at changes in curbside management policies across the city. This was a project that was really, the impetus for this project was because commerce has changed. The way in which commerce is done in our city around transportation has changed. We think about the innovations around transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft, the incredible increase of deliveries from companies like FedEx, Amazon, UPS, and even USPS. There's just in general just a greater demand for the curb, and a lot of that demand is a very short-term demand for the curb. So one of the things the city did in terms of this curbside management policy update was to look at how can we provide increased curbside access for a multitude of different users who really need the curb for a short time period. And so we updated our curbside management policies. That work was completed in kind of towards the end of 2023. We had to do some code update changes in 2024, and we're looking to implement some of our curbside management policies in 2025. One of the hallmarks of these changes is the use of flexible loading zones. Basically, a flexible loading zone is a loading zone that's a 24/7 loading zone. It's open 24/7, 365. Traditionally and historically in the city of Boulder, we have time-restricted loading zones. So it may be a loading zone from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., but then it reverts back to vehicle storage or vehicle parking. But because of this increased demand we're seeing for curbside access, we looked at, changes we could make. And one of the changes that we identified in our best practices was the conversion of these time-restricted traditional loading zones to being 24/7 flexible loading zones that can be used by any user. So back in 2022, towards the end of 22 and into 2023, we conducted a pilot in the city of Boulder in both the downtown and in Uni Hill. In Uni Hill specifically, we had 3 pilot flexible loading zones. These were located on the west side of 13th Street between Pennsylvania and the Fox Theater, on the south side of College between 12th and 13th Street, and the south side of College between 13th and 14th Street. During that pilot period, we saw hundreds of users using the flexible loading zones throughout the day. We saw a lot of private vehicles using flexible loading zones. I think we can look back at the COVID time period to see when that whole demand of short-term access, you order a sandwich from someplace, you just need that quick little spot, pull in, go in, run in, grab your sandwich, run out, leave. And that's the type of access we're looking at. In fact, during our pilot program, which lasted a few months in the Uni Hill area, in terms of the use of the flexible loading zone, about 73% were private vehicles that were taking advantage of this short-term kind of parking situation. 23% of users were Uber or Lyft, or your transportation network companies, 3% delivery vehicles, so your more traditional delivery vehicles. But we did see that these flexible loading zones were used throughout the whole day. And so that really confirmed our idea that demand has changed. There's a lot of short-term access demand, and that it would be a good policy shift to change some of these time-restricted historical loading zones to the 24/7 loading zone that, again, can be used by a variety of users. So what we're proposing in terms of implementation is looking at University Hill in the third quarter. So starting in July, what we would like to do is work with this commission and with property owners and business owners on the Hill to identify areas of the public right-of-way and the curbside that we want to switch from, maybe it's a traditional loading zone to this 24/7. So that could be the 3 pilot areas that we looked at, again, on the west side of 13th between Pennsylvania and the Fox, and College between 12th and 13th and 13th and 14th. Those could certainly be candidates. They were well used, had hundreds of users over the course of the pilot. But I think there's some other areas we may want to consider. At the time we did the pilot, we didn't have the hotel and convention area. So I think what I'd like to do is gather together, some representatives of the commission, of property owners, business owners, to really take a deep dive into the area and identify where we want to have changes in curbside use and utilize these flexible loading zones. So I'm thinking that would be a process in the month of July. During that time, we'd also be developing our engagement process with our delivery companies, with our transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft. We need to coordinate with them as well. One of the ideas is to use these flexible loading zones as designated pickup and drop off for companies like Uber and Lyft. So if you hail a ride in the Uni Hill area, it's just not going to pick you up anywhere. You're going to go to a designated spot. This is a trend that we're seeing in a lot of cities where they're trying to organize the pickup and drop off of folks using those transportation network companies. And then also, just work with Amazon, UPS, FedEx, to let them know of what changes we may be proposing into the location of loading zones. We also looked at the average duration of zones during the pilot period. We feel that a 15-minute time limit would be appropriate for these types of spaces. Many of our loading zones had 10-minute limits, but based on the data we collected, we feel that a 15-minute limit is more appropriate. I think what we'll like to do is, staff will initiate the process in July, gather the data, make proposals. We'll bring that to these stakeholders, property owners, businesses, kind of in that July-August period. By the end of August, we'd like to finalize what curbside changes we're going to make in the locations of flexible loading zones, so that in September, we can launch the communication plan, make sure everybody knows of the changes. So that includes businesses, property owners, the commercial users, the transportation network companies. And then we can install the new signage for those loading zones in late September, kind of with a communication plan release to make sure that people understand that these changes are going on. One of the other things we're looking at is enforcement strategies. We know that our parking enforcement officers, it's very difficult for them to monitor loading zones, and someone may be staying longer than what is permitted. So we have been, Transportation Mobility has been working with Community Vitality on identifying some technology that could be used to enforce. There's a company that produces thing called a safety stick, which is essentially like a bollard, a thin bollard that has cameras on it. It can look at the use of flexible loading zones and no charge to the city. The way that they make their money is they take a portion of any fines that would be related to someone overstaying their welcome in a flexible loading zone. You know, we're not sure if we want to do this, but we're gonna look at piloting it and kind of just see what the data is that we would take and whether or not we want to move forward with using a technology solution for enforcement. But I'd certainly appreciate the time bringing this to this group and would like your input. I think particular on the engagement process that we want to have with property owners, the business community, you know, the delivery companies that these businesses use to most effectively get feedback from those folks on, you know, where we want to put flexible loading zones and any other types of curbside uses or changes that they want to see. I think this is especially important in the hotel area since at the time we were doing all this curbside work, that hotel wasn't there. So I think that's a whole new area that we'll want to do a deep dive into, see what types of changes to public right away that we want to make. So that's kind of the overview that I had. I'm happy to take any questions or hear any feedback or suggestions for how to proceed with that engagement process.
Thank you, Chris. Does anyone have any questions for Chris at this time?
So much a question, but Chris, I would love to be a part of that, as far as helping out decide where these flexible parking spot would be. I would love
Sure,
to be.
that would be great. I was going to ask if the commission wanted to kind of appoint a representative to our working group. So looks like we may have a volunteer.
Thank you, Tel.
Well, yeah, I'll definitely volunteer.
Directly impacted by it, so.
Yeah.
It's right there.
Yeah.
So,
I appreciate that.
I have a question. You said that you would start, I may have missed this, the pilot in July, or you're starting to collect information in July?
So we've already conducted the pilot. I think what we'll start doing in July is that first staff will propose some locations that we think will be good candidates for permanent flexible loading zones. And then we'll bring that to you know, a group of folks that we can put together in terms of business owners, properties, and like a little community working group for them to assess staff's proposal, make any recommendations on changes, and then we'd hope to kind of wrap that up by the end of August, and so that we would have our locations identified.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. The thing that I'm realizing, that many of us on the Hill are realizing, is that, as you mentioned, we have not just one, but actually two new hotels will be coming on by August. And I wonder how much that may be changing what was discovered during the pilot. And if there is any reflection that might need to be done there as you're rolling this out later on this year. So just bringing that up.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you know, it wasn't any part of the pilot. I think, you know, we're going to see changes in traffic patterns because of those developments. And so we'll want to take kind of a fresh look. So, and I think this is also going to be an iterative process. You know, we may not get it right the first time. We may want to make adjustments. You know, a lot of cities, especially with the TNCs, and where their designated pickup and drop off locations there's usually a lot of adjustments. And then I think, you know, the whole Sundance issue is going to call for us to probably reevaluate some of those things. But hopefully, you know, doing it this summer, it will help us and prepare and get ready for Sundance, which I think is going to, I mean, if you think about the multitudes of people, limousines and movie stars and all the, you know, Uber and Lyft pickup and drop offs, we're gonna have to have a really tight curbside management plan to avoid congestion in these areas. But to me, you know, we're kind of setting the stage here with some flexible loading zones, and hopefully then we can kind of, you know, improve until we get to that Sundance time period.
Okay, thank you for that.
I just have one comment or question, I guess. When you were doing the study, you know, as it stands, especially on the Hill, it feels like those loading zones as they exist are pretty big. I know I'm always kind of driving by and looking and they're empty, right? Did you see not just the number of vehicles, but how much of it was taken up? Because it feels like it's pretty excessive to me. Only in that it just feels like there's always big stretches of 13th Street that are empty.
Yeah.
And so I just want to make sure we're not moving something in 24 hours that is sorely needed parking for people to go up there and actually spend some money on the Hill. And that's,
Yeah, no, and I think that's exactly the type of feedback. You know, what we've been seeing in kind of the best practice literature is that, you know, if you're going to have a single, like, quote, flexible loading zone, they typically only make it about like a parking space and a half, just to allow kind of maneuverability for going in and leaving. They're typically also located at either the beginning or the end of blocks and not in the middle. And so there could be some changes in that. But yeah, I think we could definitely look at what is the space requirements. We do have information from the pilot in terms of the mix of private vehicles versus trucks. I don't think we have kind of the length of truck, you know, type of data, but I think we can certainly make changes into the placement and the length of these zones, because we certainly know that parking is a critical component to economic vitality on the Hill. But we, you know, our goal is really to respond to the multitude of demands on the curb by multiple different users, and really, you know, try and hone in and get it good. So I think that is something we can certainly investigate as we make some of these changes. You know, generally we'd be looking at signage as being, you know, the key thing, you know, loading zone with arrows like from here to here. But we might see that, you know, striping may be necessary also to control so the use of those, make sure that people are using them appropriately.
I guess just one other quick comment. I didn't realize that those loading zones I thought they were just commercial, basically. I didn't know people could just go in, use them, and I don't think it's very clear on the signage. I think it just says loading
Part of the
zone.
science,
It's what?
part of the science.
Yeah, it's part of this, yeah, okay. But I know that you're talking about cameras and enforcement and all that. Couldn't it just be done as easily as, you already get 15 minutes at a parking space, right?
Once per day per license plate.
Once per, is that what, once per day per zone? Or once per day just in all of them? You don't want to say that. So, I'm just thinking, we already have a technology that works. That would be a pretty easy way to enforce it. You say you're there for 15 minutes, if you're not, then you're open for a ticket. But it just wouldn't automate the ticket, but I could see a lot of people not liking the automated ticket.
The
thing
challenges
from
was
the
that, you know,
perspective.
well, first of all, validating, if you're a Grubhub driver, going through the Park Mobile.
Yeah.
Setup to do that is a bit onerous, and they're not going
Got
to.
it.
And then our enforcement staff isn't 24/7.
Yeah.
So, it might work, that approach might work during regular operating business hours, but there are times that these flex zones are gonna be really important.
Yeah.
Later at night. That we won't have enforcement staff currently in our current enforcement structure.
Sense. Okay.
Yep.
No questions.
So I think what we'll do is, you know, we'll move forward. So likely, you know, Chris, we can plan on being back to this commission maybe in July. But then, you know, any assistance in kind of thinking about the best way of engaging business and property owners to get their feedback. You know, we're open to any suggestion that will help get the word out and make sure that we get, people heard about their needs around this, so.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention when we introduced ourselves, I'm the representative of the Fox, right? So I'm happy to talk to Cheryl and get her guidelines.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to also be part of the discussion. Whatever's next.
And if Sam is going to be here, we have more to talk about with parking on the hill shortly.
She'll be here shortly. She's waiting. She's coming in from another meeting,
Got it, thank you.
which is
There's
why we.
Christina.
put her on the list.
I was in that meeting with her.
Were you?
Yes.
Yes.
And I'm still, yes. They were solving all the housing problems for the city of Boulder.
See, perfect.
No, community vitality.
Parking and housing. We
Yeah.
got
Put it on your calendars, May 6th, 2025, all housing problems solved. All right, before I let him off the hook here, any other questions or discussion for Chris before we move on in our agenda? This is a really important thing in terms of effects on the Hill, so I want to make sure people have an opportunity. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you, Tel, and thank you, Trent, for volunteering. Chris, great information. Thank you for that, and looking forward to hearing as you do your work later this year.
All right, we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thanks,
All
Chris.
right, that brings us to matters from staff. Who's going to lead this set of discussion? Chris?
Well, yeah, I will introduce the topics and then hand it over to the individual staff members. It's, we're in May, and of course, that means we're already looking at the 2026 budget. And so Elliot is here to give you a preview of the work that he's leading in the department to prepare for our 2026 budget year. So Elliot, you have some slides that give you enough time to pull it up.
I hope so. We'll find out. Oh, look at that. We have a PowerPoint presentation, but that's not a presentation. Now it is, right? There.
All right, there.
Cool. So yeah, thanks, Chris, for the introduction. So yeah, Elliot Levante, Business Services Senior Manager for Community Vitality. Gonna go over some high-level details about the 2026 budget development. Spoiler alert, not a lot of changes for UJID. Caveat capital. So we have this big capital expense that we're doing this year. Don't really have any big planned capital expenses going into the future. That doesn't mean we can't, just means we don't right now, and that's fine because the timeline doesn't really rush us to make any decisions right now. So you'll see some of the changes, or excuse me, some of the timeline of the different changes that we'll have to enact during this year's budget cycle. That first deadline, apologize, May 2nd, there's a lot of font underneath that $sign. But basically that May 2nd deadline is obviously passed. Really all it was is there anything that just costs more because things costs more? I'm not going to use the T word in this presentation, but those are some of the things we had to consider when looking at the budget. There weren't really any significant cost drivers in the 2026 budget development that we had for UCAMC. So really not a whole lot there. The other thing we had to do is we had to put together a draft fund financial. So kind of our outlook, our fund outlook for the next 6 years, and which includes some of those increases. The next one is May 23rd, and that's really taking a look at where did we overspend and where did we underspend, and should we move some money around to make sure we don't overspend and underspend. Fancy word is called realignment, and that will happen on May 23rd. So we'll be doing that, and I'll talk a little bit about the details and what we've kind of discovered in doing our analysis. And then the last date is June 27th, which will be nice because we will actually have enough time to come to you all in, every other month. Sorry, July, when we come back to UCAMC, we will have a proposed budget for you all to take a vote on. You can see those July commission meetings is the next one. I guess if I read my own slides, I'd know what we were doing. So we'll discuss those final submissions to city manager's office and the executive budget team. We will vote on those and ask for your recommendation to go to city manager's office with that budget, knowing that things could change like it did last year. So we will then, of course, be very transparent about any changes that did happen post the submission to city manager's office. Some dates in terms of the processes: September 11th is the study session with council, so that's when they'll be discussing the entire organization's budget. And then the first reading of the citywide budget's happening October 9th. And then October 23rd is that second reading. And that is actually when city council forms as the board of directors for the additional general improvement districts, and they will actually approve and appropriate the funds in 2026, as well as the 2025 mill levy. I'm gonna keep going on. If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, but otherwise I'll just keep moving. Doing a little bit of a recap on commission priorities and challenges. Dane, this may look a little bit different to you than the presentation that we had for you when you were coming in. The reason being is these commission priorities are directly from the priorities that have been discussed by commissioners. The priorities that were presented in our Welcome to UCAMC were based a little bit more on what Puma discovered during their research and doing the general improvement district analysis. So they very much realigned. The words have changed a little bit. Theirs are obviously more current. These priorities were finalized last February, May, was it May? Last May?
It is May right now, March.
Last March, thank you. And then those challenges are kind of some of the things you can see there. So that existing needs and services, you know, the need for additional subsidies is something we're constantly discussing and trying to figure out, hence the general improvement district analysis, and how do we find a more long-term financial outlook for the Hill, maybe not necessarily UGID, but the Hill in general. So we're constantly looking at those things. So where we are, not meaning to put a trash can as a slide for where we are, it's just more of an investment we had on the Hill, the all new trash cans. So that's something of significance. It's a nice thing that we could do and pilot up on the Hill, and we were very excited about it. Looking a little bit at the analysis though, our financial performance from 2024 ended in a green area. Things were up, which was great. Our total source of funds was a little bit higher, as you probably recall from last budget presentation. For the commissioners who were here, our largest income, except the general fund transfer, is actually interest. That continued to be the case for 2024. It was also our highest income source of. And our ending fund balance there in return was also a little bit higher than what we anticipated for 2024. We also did see a decrease in our expenses from what we were anticipating. So I'll get into that a little bit more. So here's the sources and uses of funds. Again, there's a lot of information on this slide. We can certainly get into a little bit more, but you can kind of see the projected versus actual lines on both. On the sources side, they came in either at or above what we anticipated for most things, minus the parking revenue, which we have reforecasted a little bit. Some of that has to do with some operational changes with us transitioning to Ames, our new platform. So there's some things that we had to work out there. And then the use of funds, most, if not all, came under what we projected, which is good. Again, we can see some realignments there. If you look at the economic vitality, we spent a lot more than we anticipated. But due to cost savings in the other programs, we were able to afford that and ended on a note where we actually could come in a little bit lower than projected overall. So some key takeaways, positive things, right? So investments and earnings, we 158% increase over what we were projected. So that's great. So it's nice to see that we still have a pretty good ROI on our fund balance. Total expenses, again, were lower, and the ending fund balance was slightly higher. Kind of looking at some areas of review, this is kind of what's helping guide us into the realignment during that next phase. Is we saw a huge increase in our economic vitality and district management spending, which is not a bad thing. That's money going directly back to the district for things like Roots Music Festival, and some of the other district vitality programs and projects that we offer up there. Again, the parking revenue fell a little short, so we do have a little bit of consideration there. And our capital improvement program spending was just a little under from what we were anticipating, but that will shift into 2025 as the money is just rolling over from last year into this year. So where are we going? Looking at 25 and 26, you can see there's a little bit of a gap there from adopted versus projected. And we're looking at that and trying to figure out the forecasted property taxes came in significantly lower. I don't know if you all received your property assessment values. I did for mine, and mine actually decreased this year. So great as a homeowner, property owner, bad as a fund manager of general improvement districts. So it's the yin and the yang. So some of the property owners might be happy to have a smaller tax bill, but what that means is less revenue for us to reinvest back into the hill. So some things to consider. You can kind of see here's a little bit of a graph in terms of our fund balance projections. The reason we see such a significant drop in fund balance in 2025 is because of the capital investment that we're going to be doing up there with the streetscapes. Thank you, streetscapes and the Broadway median project. So that was one of the big expenses that we have in 2025. We do anticipate that to happen. I know Regan could probably provide an update. I think you've been working with transportation a little bit on the Broadway median specifics of that. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we see such a significant decrease in fund balance there in 25. The sources of funds, if you look at the kind of the 25 adopted versus 2025 projected. Again, this is looking at what was approved back in October of last year, that's your adopted, versus we have some new insights into, for instance, investments and earnings on interest, which helps us understand what we should expect to see. So we can do some revisions on the revenue side, as well as on the expense side, that use of funds. So not a whole lot of changes from the revenue side. I hesitant to change anything in the parking revenue based on what was adopted in 2025. Kind of making some efforts to make sure that all gets to where it needs to be. But I did see some opportunities there for us to do some interest and investment projection changes for 2025. So more than what we anticipated in the adoption. However, in 26, because of our significant capital investment into the hill, we're going to be decreasing our fund balance, therefore decreasing our earning potential on what we have in the bank. So some financial insights there. Again, I already talked about the investment going up, the total revenue sources kind of increasing slightly in 2025, basically driven by those the interest earnings. And then modest revenue growth, which is good, but it's just modest, just given the headwinds of what has happened at the state legislative level for property taxes, and also the reassessment. This is a reassessment year, so that will have an impact in future years. Again, some expenditure challenges. We're going to be doing some realignments for that economic vitality one, that big one, and the capital improvement program. Although it is a substantial investment, it is an investment nonetheless back into the hill directly. So it is good to see. And then the expenses being projected a little bit higher. That's slightly due to because it's comparing what was approved versus what is now projected, which includes the encumbrance carryover, which is all the money that we were under contract and obligated to pay in 2024 that we didn't actually get out the door, is now in the 25 amount. So where we are going, increases because things cost more. That's really a long-term outlook, kind of doing a flat 3% CPI, just an assumption on expenses. However, if we do continue to perform like we have, we shouldn't see those big 3% increases. But it is something we want to bake into the projections just to be cautious and make sure that we do have enough fund balance to at least provide the programs that we have stood up. One thing that did actually decrease, we saw an 11% decrease for the UGID fund for cost allocations. So that's not the case in all the funds across the city. So just given the use of central services, so again, cost allocations is us paying for things like human resources, city manager's office, city attorney's office, IT, all of the like central services that are provided to UGID for all those things. We pay back to the general fund. So it's kind of interesting. The general fund transfers to UGID and then we transfer back to general fund. But the amount we transfer back is substantially lower than the amount that the general fund transfers to University Hill. Again, that second phase, moving money around to where we actually spend it. And then asking for more money is that last thing, and really, we don't see any significant proposals yet for UGID. I think as we start to have the conversation about the general improvement district, and if there is any expenses that make sense for UGID to help finance, we may be putting that into some of our proposals. We are fortunate enough that I believe we have enough in this year's appropriation to cover the second phase of our commercial areas blueprint, AKA general improvement districts analysis. So we may not have to do a proposal for 2026 either. So we've been trying to think into the future as best as we can and get things set up for us to hit the ground running rather than to wait for next year's appropriation to be approved in October and then spend it. So we thought a little bit about that this year. Which leads us to our big to-do list. So on the district vitality project side, it really is that commercial area blueprints, and it really is the general improvement district analysis that's our big to-do list item. Regan, I know, is constantly working on district vitality investments. And then we also have the arts and culture staff who is doing a reinvestment. We have some leftover money from the 2017 CCS appropriation that is actually dedicated to the Hill. So it's about $70,000 that our arts and culture staff is looking to do a public arts project up in the Hill, which is great. That is separate from anything that Regan has already invested in with the district vitality funds, such as the crosswalk mural. And then again, going back to the 25 through 31 CIP, basically this year, we've got the large investment for the streetscapes and the Broadway median, but going future, we do not have anything programmed as of today. Cool. Questions, comments, anything from staff?
What was the 70K? It was sorry, where did that come from? 2017.
Yeah, so
Community culture safety tax.
yeah, so the CC. Let me think about this.
So you've heard of CCRS?
Mhm.
So this was before CCRS, there was CCS.
CCS.
Correct. Yep, so that's the first extension of the very first CCS was in 2017. And that's where those funds, so it's actually not coming out of UGID, it is coming from a dedicated sales tax that was from 2017.
And that has to be spent.
And it has to be spent on the Hill, that's correct, yeah, because during the CCS 2A ballot, it was actually dedicated to the Hill. So it was
There were
on the
specific,
ballot, specific ballot language.
If there were, but how would somebody submit a proposal?
So CCS covered the event street, for instance.
Yeah, sure.
So there's a big bucket of money for Hill investment. Most of that was spent. There's a little bit of money left over. It still needs to be spent on something on the Hill.
Yeah. And
So, but there's no rehashing the buckets, right?
but if there were somebody, like if I had an idea, for instance,
So in CCRS,
Yeah.
there was a bucket set aside for the community to apply for things.
Yeah.
To that, and so that was not part of this bucket of money.
so how does this bucket of money get spent? Sorry, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
It is a line item in the city's budget that says Hill reinvestment, so that's where we're at, considering that we need to spend it on the Hill. Matt's been working with his team to envision art public art improvement.
Okay, got it.
So close. I see you on the edge of
Well,
your
if I could- because it's been assigned to a public, Matt Jazansky, hello. Because it's been assigned to a public art project, the public art policy guides how that, selection of an artist and contracting an artist takes place.
Yeah.
One note is that we've been talking with the public art team about integrating some community engagement with the Hill, Streetscapes project. And so next meeting, we'll be talking about some of that, but, so there'll be some outreach to the community about how to spend that money wisely on a piece of public art and exactly where. But ultimately, to your point, is that artists can apply to a call to propose ideas for, projects, once we have our arms around what the community would like.
Okay.
Thanks, Trent.
Elliot, I have a very quick question. Well, maybe, I don't know if it's a question necessarily. If the primary source of income for the Hill is interest on our fund balance, and the fund balance continues to go down, how much longer can that continue?
Not long. The reason I say it's our primary source is because if it's the biggest dollar amount and it's substantial enough that it's quite a bit over our parking revenue and property taxes. Parking revenue and property taxes combined is about $70,000. Interest income right now is like $150,000. So it's like 2x. What is that? So it will not continue if we decide to use the fund, which I would suggest we use the fund to do investments back on the Hill rather than preserve it for interest income. But that being said, as we use the fund, it will certainly decrease the amount of interest that we earn on that fund balance. So it's a give and take relationship. I think, given the conversation with the district analysis, I think there's a opportunity where we may get in the next year or less insight into what we may be doing going forward, whether that's a DDA, how that DDA looks, the boundaries of the DDA, etc. And if there is a formation of a DDA and it includes the Hill, then maybe it's a opportunity for the general improvement district to say, let's do one last big hurrah kind of thing. So there's a lot of opportunities there on what that looks like. Of course, there's still an asset that the district owns. So there's a lot of things that we can talk about in terms of increasing revenue. I know we've had discussions with the commission about, parking changes for that district owned lot and how we could create more revenue. And we're still having those conversations and doing that analysis. And I know it's been few months since we've talked about that, but it's not off the table, so.
It is on the agenda today.
Oh, great. See, that's what I mean. We are on it. And Sam is on the call, so she'll even get you more information. So yeah, we are very cognizant of the fact that it is not a forever thing because we don't want to not invest on the Hill for the idea of having money to make interest on.
I would note that the largest revenue source is the general fund transfer, which is tied to on-street parking revenue. And we are not anticipating stopping to charge for on-street parking anytime in the near future. So there is special revenue created in the district. But in short, we are also being really cognizant of our actuals. You noticed in the fund financials that are actuals for 2024, as Elliot explained, we're much under our projecteds, and we're continuing to be very thoughtful and prudent in our use of funds to try to not eat into the fund balance as much as possible to reserve those resources for a capital outlay in the future.
Correct.
Really appreciate that answer. Thank you. And I'll just make a statement then that, the reinvestment on the Hill, there is a point here where dollars invested on the Hill should have some form of an ROI associated with it. That just a general improvement may not be enough. That strategic investments may be the thing that we're going to need to be looking at in the future, particularly if a DDA is not adopted, if we don't have some sort of lifeline in terms of having a larger tax base to draw from, I think we'll probably be faced with that kind of notion of we spend $1 to make two or something, some sort of strategic plan for spending that fund balance.
Absolutely.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nope, you hit it right on the nose.
Any other questions or comments for Elliot or anything on this subject? All right. Sina, thank you very much, Elliot. I really appreciate your presentation every year. Thank you for putting all that together for us. Okay, Chris, who's up next?
Right, Regan is up next to talk more about improvement district analysis and update. We had a great meeting with City Council a couple weeks ago. So just want to give you all an update on where that work stands. Not a huge presentation today, I don't imagine.
Just a verbal
verbal
update.
update. So over to you, Regan.
Should I start with an overview for Dane's benefit or, okay, sure. I'll just give you a brief high level summary. So the improvement district analysis, it's an analysis of our existing GIDs, so UGID, Pagid, Central Area General Improvement District downtown, and then the two overlapping districts in Boulder Junction, as well as some broader considerations for other areas like the civic area, for example. So we've been working with a consultant based out of Denver, Progressive Urban Management Associates. You'll hear their name a lot, PUMA. And they have provided us with recommendations on how our districts should evolve to really meet some of the challenges that we are seeing today. So one of the key recommendations is exploring the creation of a downtown development authority. And I'm happy to provide you with the council memo on what I'll send it over to you. It goes into more detail. But we did present to council a couple weeks ago. It was essentially the same presentation that we shared with you all during the joint commission meeting. Was really well received and supported by council, including the key recommendation of exploring the DDA. So I'll just take a moment to outline some next steps and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So immediate next step, we're receiving a final report from PUMA in the coming weeks, or actually by the end of June, once staff has some time to review. And that will go into more detail around the recommendations. In the meantime, we are working internally to map out a scope of work, including a timeline for the DDA analysis. So kind of phase 2, that deeper analysis of whether a DDA is really feasible or not. And working backwards from the goal of getting this on the November 2026 ballot. And so, yeah, we'll be working over the coming weeks to finalize a scope for a consultant team to conduct the next phase of analysis. So that will include financial modeling, evaluating existing governance structures. So kind of what we were speaking to, does UGID remain in place? Does it evolve? Does it dissolve? So kind of exploring what that looks like. Those are some unanswered questions right now. And then supporting community engagement as well. So those are next steps on district analysis. And then just a reminder, we're also working on the scope for the development of the commercial areas blueprint. And that'll be kind of a longer term vision, strategic vision for all commercial areas throughout Boulder, not just our existing GIDs. And that'll align with the Boulder Valley comp plan update as well. So we'll continue to keep you all posted. Happy to answer questions or anything.
Anyone have any questions for Regan? No? All right. Well, thank you, Regan, for that. Appreciate that. Looking forward to it. This is such important work that you're bringing up there, and hopefully there'll be more of the next meeting. And so, Chris, who is this Bromberg individual?
Samantha Bromberg is joining us online. You'll recall from well, we've discussed a number of times as we're contemplating ways to improve the fund financials for UGID. One of the topics the commission has brought up is how do we leverage the 14th Street lot to generate revenue. And so Sam has been, she's our subject matter expert on all things parking and access management and transformation in the way that we manage our assets in pursuit of things like optimizing the use of the space, and generating additional revenue. So Sam's been hard at work and is prepared to share some of that work with you all. So over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I have a very brief update. We'll have more information a little bit later in the year, but hi everyone, Sam Bromberg, Senior Project Manager, Community Vitality, and specifically I work on the access and parking team. I came to you all last year in July to talk about the 14th Street lot on the Hill and to see how we might be able to kind of utilize that asset in the shorter term, at least, to the best of our abilities. And so what we discussed last year was a recommendation to introduce some long-term permits. We previously had them in the Pleasant Street lot. Of course, we no longer have access to the Pleasant Street lot. And there's definitely a need for some longer term permits on the Hill for in commuters and businesses. So we are planning to introduce a small number of those permits this summer. We are doing it specifically in the summer because students will have left for the year. It gives us an opportunity to kind of establish the program before students come back in the fall and adjust to those policies. One thing that already did take effect was we did increase the cost per hour of that particular surface lot from $1.50 to $2 an hour. We did that specifically to make sure that we're increasing turnover in anticipation of having more parkers with permits in that lot coming up. So that's what's been going on. We're just kicking off the project again now to introduce those permits. So you'll probably be hearing some of the communications that are going to be going out to folks about the small amount of permits that we are going to be able to put up for sale to just folks who are within the district. So more to come there, and then definitely you'll see a full evaluation of how that pilot's going from me later on. But like I said, short and sweet, but happy to entertain questions at this time.
What percentage of the lot will be allocated to those permits?
I think at the what we're contemplating right now is somewhere around 70%, so a fair amount of the lot. It'll be pretty significant, but there really is the need for those permits. There's, you know, in chatting with folks, I think most businesses on the Hill are like, yes, I would like a permit. There's only 50 spaces in the lot. And so, you know, in order for it to be meaningful for the folks that want permits, it needs to be like a good amount of spaces that we permit out in that lot. I'll also add that this was discussed last year that long-term permits are a better option in terms of like revenue generation than, you know, just day usage or short-term usage. So that's just something else to keep in mind with these permits.
Did we decide, I know we talked about this before and I ideated on it, but we never got the answer. Will those be 24-hour permits, or will those just be sort of daytime business hours so people could pay and park in the evening and visit the Hill and, you know, go to dinner or whatever, or those?
Yeah, I mean, so typically our permits are like the same hours as when paid parking is in effect, which I believe is 9 to 7. Though typically what we see with permits in areas where it's a lot of businesses is that they're being utilized mostly between, you know, 9 and 5. And another thing to note is that with, you know, more hybrid schedules, even if we sell 70% of the spaces as permits, we're not necessarily going to see 70% of the spaces being utilized on any given day because people work different schedules. So hopefully that answers your question.
So they're not numbered. So
No. No, it's going to be a first come, first serve, which is the same way that we sell permits in pretty much any other lot or garage in the city. So there is no guarantee that you'll have a space, but, you know, increasing the cost hourly to pay, hopefully that's going to generate the turnover so that we're not going to see an issue with no parking available for those permit holders. Also, normally, like in business operations, those permit holders are gonna be getting there earlier in the day than, say, someone who's coming in for lunch or dinner.
What would a permit cost, or do you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, we had talked about the permits costing around $200 a quarter to start. That was kind of like right within the realm of, what market rates are looking like in the area, maybe a little bit lower. So that's what we were planning to start with.
Maybe I missed this. 70% will be for permit holders. Are those reserved spaces? Is that something that comes with signage or something like that? Or how does that work? Is that what you're saying is on demand? It's not reserved?
Yeah, so what I was mentioning earlier is that we would not like reserve spaces in the sense that we're not gonna like paint the spaces or anything. It is first come, first serve. So when we sell permits in any of our garages or lots, we tell parkers, you're not guaranteed a space. That's just the nature of things, because we have to share between, people who are just coming in for lunch for the day, and then those folks who have permits and are working longer term.
Thank you. I missed that. Thank you.
No worries.
Any other questions for Sam? Okay. Thank you, Sam, for all of that information.
You're welcome. Thanks everyone for your time tonight.
Thanks.
All right, last and least, the chair of the Downtown Management Commission, Don Poe, has suggested that he would like for there to be a joint commission summit, an opportunity for all the commissions to get together to discuss some longer range priorities. I let him know that I would certainly add that to the agenda for the other commissions to discuss and consider whether that's something that interested them in their priorities. And so that's what this agenda item is about, just to suggest that if there is consensus among our commissions that they would like an opportunity to get together, staff will take that consensus and likely recommend that we use the fall meeting where we typically target commission retreat conversation to do maybe a joint commissions summit, but certainly only if that's something that all commissions feel like time is appropriate and there's things that you all want to get out of such an opportunity.
What is the definition of the summit?
It's whatever you want it to be.
So I guess to add on to that question, do we have an annual retreat?
That is up to the commission to determine. Yeah, we do have a time, my placeholder, sorry, it's getting late in the evening, a placeholder in the November meeting, I think in the business rhythm is for more formal retreat, if that's something that the commissions and individual commissions feel like they need at the time, if priorities that have been stated seem to be shifting. That's an opportunity for us to help organize a retreat in advance of a new council coming in and considering their priorities in the year ahead.
I'm go ahead and jump in here and say a couple of things. One, I am in favor of us having a retreat as a commission. I am also, in addition, in favor of us having a summit with the other commissions. I think that there is a lot going on for the Hill, as I've said already in this meeting once. But also, I think that coordination with other commissions, I think, is going to be essential going forward, particularly in light of the potential of a DDA, but also in the wake of there potentially not being a DDA. So my proposal, and I know that all of our time is limited, but I would say that this year in particular might be a very good one for us to have both of those things occur. So I'm saying that for the good of the order and for conversation so that others on the commission can state their preference and also maybe react to this proposal that I put on the table.
I don't think you're wrong. I'm sorry, I agree with that completely, especially this year. Feels like.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I thought the joint meeting of all the commissions was helpful to even get to know some other people. I think, we didn't have a ton of time to do that. It was more about a staff presentations, I think, which were very helpful. And so I think having more time to work together as commissions, especially given the reasons Ted stated, makes sense. I'm wondering, time is always a factor. So if we can make them not all day retreats or, be very succinct with our planning, it probably makes sense to do ours first and then so that we can set an agenda or goals for when we want to meet with downtown. I think November is also a difficult time of year just in general. So I don't know how we can stage those effectively for people's schedules.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of hop in again. I'm sorry to interrupt if someone was trying to speak there, but I will say, Chris and staff, I will kind of look to you because if it seems like, and there's still others to speak, it seems like we're in favor of having the commissions come together for a summit, for a tete-a-tete, as they say. But what you're also hearing from Danica, which I agree with, is that I think it makes sense for us to have our retreat prior to that happening. That logistically may be a challenge for staff. And so I want to make sure that you all are sort of weighing in on what's realistic to make sure that we can maybe hit those goals.
Great, appreciate the feedback. We will try to figure out a way to put the puzzle pieces together. And that's why we wanted to call the question. So stay tuned. I think there also is an opportunity, maybe given where we plan to be with the commercial areas blueprint, there is probably a very appropriate space for a summit type conversation that is applicable to all districts. We would be able to have someone help facilitate a conversation and guide outcomes with that level of the work. All right, that concludes matters from staff.
Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it. Lots of work happening in the last 6 weeks. I really appreciate all of your support for the Hill and the other commissions and the question of whether or not we were going to be doing a DDA. So matters from commissioners is next. This is the UCAMC bi-monthly recap, check-in recap. It's a recap of a recap. And as seems to be the thing now, what the heck did we even talk about? I did this last meeting as well. I think that it was the DDA was pretty much top of mind for us and that upcoming multi-commission thing. I think also we discussed security on the Hill and some recent developments in terms of Chicken on the Hill closing after their unsuccessful review by the liquor board. They have since decided not to continue to operate, as far as I can tell. They are closed. Other than that, I do not recall other major agenda items that came up. So someone please correct me if there was something else that was important there. I'll try to do better the next time around of keeping some notes. I'm not caught in this situation of winging it. It's not comfortable for me. Anything else around the UCAMC by meeting recap, check-in recap? All right.
I think you recapped it well. Thank you, Ted.
Thank you, Danica. All right. As a reminder, we have upcoming meetings. The bi-monthly check-in meeting will be coming up on Tuesday, June 10th, and it will be Ted Rockwell and Dane Anderson in that meeting. Dane, you'll be receiving a meeting invite with a link. I believe it's a Teams meeting that we have from, I believe Ellie ends up sending that out at the end of the day. So just be on the lookout for that. It's a relatively informal discussion of essentially these agenda items and other things that maybe you or I may have on our mind. And it gives staff an ability to also to give us an update in transit between meetings. Meeting every other month, we were finding might not produce the same amount of momentum. So just keep that in mind. There's no pressure. I'm fully expecting you to kind of show up and listen. But if you have questions, by all means, and if you have concerns, we should definitely address those as well. So going from there, the next commission meeting will be Tuesday, July 8th. In the wreckage of the Fish concerts, we will come back together and discuss how the Hill performed for 3 nights worth of Fish and multiple late night activities at the Fox and elsewhere. Are there any other things for the good of the order that any commissioners would like to bring up for this meeting? All right, seeing
Just
none.
welcome to Dane, hopefully. Thank you for joining our board. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard, Dane. All right, well, seeing none, welcome, Dane, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all staff for your work today and leading up to this meeting.
Yes, thank you. Thanks,
Thank
Ted.
you.